Welcome to the 3Haunted podcast, where we bring you all things horror, supernatural, folklore, mythology, and all things that go bump in the night.
What's up, everybody? This is your co-host, Ashley Lunar Goddess, Gorilla Girl filmmaker and horror-loving cinephile. I'm just your average podcast-producing badass.
I'm John Thomas. Some would say that I go a little too far with my love of all things horror, paranormal, and meta, but I say, talk nerdy to me, and I'm all yours.
I'm DJ Segura, an aspiring paranormal musician who plays live for the dead because the living just doesn't want to hear me.
The Dead of Winter Horror Network and Nick King from the 508 Productions invite you to endure the most terrifying immersive experience in all of podcasting. Beneath the Red Umbrella, now available wherever you listen to podcasts. Beneath the Red Umbrella, when the snow falls, the killing season begins.
What's up, ghouls, gals, and all of our haunted pals out there? In today's episode, we'll be discussing demonology and the paranormal with our special guest, James Annitto. James is a renowned demonologist, paranormal investigator, researcher, and director of the Presidium Warriors of St. Michael. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on.
I know I'm excited.
No, I will say James is awesome. We connected on Facebook, and very shortly after connecting, he reached out and he's like, "Let's podcast." I'm like, "I love this. I would love to podcast." So I've been having it on my books to schedule him for season 5.
Season 5. Hey, that's a that's a lot of seasons right there.
Yeah, he came to me at we'd already recorded season 4, so I was like, "Oh, James, we're already done with 4, but I would love to have you on 5."
So how many episodes in season 5 are you guys at right now?
We just started recording them. So I think this is episode 4, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, just started
nice.
recording.
Number 4. I love it.
Yeah, you're one of our first. So I told you as soon as we started, I'm like, I will reach out to you and we will get you on season 5 as soon as we start scheduling them. So
And you kept to your word.
I sure did. I put a calendar. I'm a total nerd, and I put a calendar reminder on my phone. Reach out to James. So
Hey, I'm the same way. Calendar everything. I'm a complete nerd myself, and but yeah, no. Hey, you got to calendar everything. I know you have a lot of hands in a lot of different pots, so I can imagine I do as well. So
yeah, you do. And speaking of which, I mean, demonologist. We've talked about demonology in the past seasons that we've had, but we've never had an actual demonologist. So when you said that was part of your background, I'm like, please come talk to us about this. No. How did you get into demonology?
oh man, I thought the show was about dermatology. I think I booked the wrong show.
No. That's part B. We'll get into that after halftime.
So, to keep a very long story short, as I've been in the paranormal field for 20 years with a true timestamp, legitimacy to that. But I got into demonology more so because of a lot of childhood trauma. And, I was very... I wouldn't like to say the word agnostic or atheist. I would say more a cynic towards ideas of cultural religions and folklore. And so in my early childhood, as soon as I could be cognitive enough to be literate in the sense of reading material, I started picking up books about Greek mythology, biology, and I would spend a copious amount of time in the library because I was adopted and I was raised by a Lutheran family, and I was kind of always told why I was adopted and what happened to me at an early age. And it really, of course, wasn't lavishing what had happened to me. But so, when I was in the church, in the pews as a young child, I would start questioning all the things that were being said to me. Why was I put in this predicament if I'm supposed to be innocent? And why would this occur to me? So a lot of that drive, that childhood trauma and hearing the stories led me down a path of a lot of research, a lot of study, and eventually, of course, dabbling into the paranormal because once you go down a rabbit hole, there's a lot of pathways down there, especially, of course, who use the earth as a tool of an analogy. There's so many pathways below us that we don't even understand. And so going down the pathway of theology and religion, then you explore the doors of, are there aliens, ufology, what are cryptids, why are these animals not discovered, and then of course the ghost spirits, the parapsychological viewpoints of it, with poltergeist and psychokinesis and telepathy and all that stuff. So like it kind of just opened a floodgate for me, and at 14 years old I started dabbling into investigating the paranormal. At that time I'd call it ghost hunting because Ghost Hunters had just came out. I live in Rhode Island, and it kind of was like an epiphany. People actually do this, be outside the books you read, such as like a Hans Holzer, the Ed Lorraine Warrens, and uh, you know Charles Babbage, Charles Dickens, and the list can go on of people that predate a lot of things that people don't understand. Especially with the Ghost Club in the late 1800s, but. So when I seen it on television in the sense of locality, not just like scariest places on earth, I said, I'm going to do this too, because this gives me a gateway to understanding of spirits through myself exist. And so doing all that in my youth, I eventually, of course, was studying forms of theology, and demonology was one of them, such as evil spirits, because every culture has a tendency of a yin and the yang, or a good and evil, or what I like to call it through Greek philosophy, a theodicy of good and bad. So, I was just in the right place at the right time. I befriended a man named Andre Courier, who's no longer with us. We lost him a few Decembers ago. And he was part of a team called Rhode Island Paranormal Society, and they made their big claim to fame was that they were on an episode of The Haunted on Animal Planet, and the episode was called Demon Attack, and it was the highest rated episode on The Haunted at that time. And of course, didn't last much longer. That show disappeared from the airwaves, or the television programming. But so when Andre, of course, left the group, Paranormal Drama, I confided in him, said, "Hey, I'd love to put a team together." And we did. It was called Ghost, weirdly enough, and it was called Ghost Hunters of Supernatural Truth, aka Ghost. And he had worked with a demonologist on that episode named Carl Johnson, who I was not infatuated with, but I respected and knew of his work because of his work with Ed and Lorraine Warren, him being on the first two seasons of Ghost Hunters. But oddly enough, I actually had met his twin brother Keith in Walmart. I used to be a Walmart department manager many, many moons ago. And so when I saw him, I kind of fangirled a little bit. And I said, "Oh my God, I know who you are." And he's like, "Yeah, you do?" I was like, "Yeah, you were on Ghost Hunters, and I followed a little bit of your work." And so, he'd come and see me and ask me questions about recorders and electronic devices, because it's not just because I worked in Walmart electronics department, but I also have a computer programming background and a Cisco networking background from when I was in high school in Votech, and then my early college, once I got out of the military. And so I had a very big computer background, so he would always ask me questions. But when Andre told me, "Oh, I know Carl, and I can get you in touch with him," I was like, "Okay, well, I can talk to the other brother and pick his brain." And something just happened. It clicked. Me and Carl hit it off, and he then realized, okay, this guy has a tech background. We need a tech manager. So I was Humpty Dumpty on the wall, like Ghost on one side, Beyond the Veil Paranormal on the other side, which was him, Carl Johnson, and Dina Palazzini, and Rich Stacy. And I said, do I be tech manager for this group where I can grow and learn and be involved in specific cases I still have questions about, such as the demonic, because I wasn't at that point religious. Still well, that's a lie. I was religious. I was involved in I was a pastoral assistant at the Church of Christ, but I still had never experienced the demonic. So I was still on the fence about the demonic, right? Because there are a lot of Christians that don't believe in an incarnate evil in that sense. And so I was on the fence with that term and that ideology. But so I said, I'm going to join Carl. And so basically, Carl took me under his wing. And that's really basically where the demonology started full fledged. And, I left Ghost behind. And, of course, they didn't like that, unfortunately. And some bridges weren't mended, unfortunately. It's humanity for you. And I can understand why they were mad at me for it. I chose opportunity over friends, and I do feel bad about to this day, but I also feel like I wouldn't be where I am at today if I didn't take that road. And it's definitely been an interesting road for sure, the past 14 years since that route. And I wouldn't change any of it. But yeah, that's how I got into demonology. And of course, I can continue the story, a whole autobiography of myself. But of course, me and Carl eventually went separate ways too, and then that's when I went on my own, either consulting or working with other groups. And at that point, when I left Beyond the Veil Paranormal, I usually had coined myself a studying demonologist because I wasn't fully there yet. I wasn't fully acquainted with everything, and I'm still not. I think every day in life is a new day to learn something new, and studying should always be appropriate in your life. Knowledge is power. So, but it's been a long road for sure.
Now, speaking of studying demonologist, when it comes to demonology and learning, studying, researching, where are you finding your information? Like, do you turn to more of what like the different religious sects? That sounds like I said a naughty word. The different uh, partitions of religion have on hand, or where are you finding your research?
Yeah, you can read scriptures all the way from Yahwism, which predates Judaism, or you can Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, which is the oldest modern day religion at 5,000 years old, which had plenty of demons or evil spirits. Shinto, which is another old one in Japanese culture. Of course, any Abrahamic religion has it. A lot of African mythologies have it. Greek mythology had it. So you can go comb through all the scriptures and tomes of the past. There also was some prolific demonologists throughout time. One of them was a mass killer. I respect his work in the sense of his writings, but he killed a lot of people. But King James wrote the book Demonology in, I believe, 1560. And then, of course, predating that, there was a physician. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he was Belgian, and I believe or German, in that specific area. And he wrote Malefice Maleficarium, which was, of course, a witch hunting book, but it also hinted upon topics of the demons because a lot of people in that time during the European Inquisition thought demons and Satan were manipulating people into witchcraft and vampirism and all that stuff. So there are a lot of early tomes. From even to the Renaissance age that you can read upon this, and then of course a lot of it's cultural too. So I always say a demonologist should be fluent in psychology. I have a bachelor's in psychology, and I'm working on my master's starting in January. So you have to be fluent in cultural identity, cultural traditions, and so there's a lot to it. So there's a lot of tomes, a lot of material you have to pick up and read to understand what you could possibly come up against, or even to how to discern with certain people that you're dealing with and their belief systems and how you can tackle it, or what religious leaders you can get involved if they're opposite viewpoints of yourself. So there's a lot to it. It's not like picking up a book or 3 books or 4 books or 5 books. It is a life study. It's something that you have to take as a vocation, in my opinion. And it's not a roller coaster ride. There's not highs where it's fun, and there's not lows where like there's a lot of lows, to be honest with you, but it's not a thrill ride. It's a vocation that you take part of your life, and if you apply it, like I call myself an applied demonologist, right? So demonology is a study, just like angiology or theology is. So you can study it, but once you start to apply it, like a biologist can just be a professor, or a biologist could be somebody that's out in the field and applies it. So I apply that research and that data that has been accumulated throughout thousands of years, and I utilize it in real life circumstances. So that's the difference between me and I always say studying it is good. You should, especially being in the paranormal field, if you investigate places or investigate homes, you should have a little bit of an inkling of knowledge what's the quite the possibilities are. And of course, there are people like myself that then you can call in, because then you realize, okay, this is something beyond my pay grade, and I don't qualify myself as an expert. I like to say the word specialist, but specialize in certain things. So a little bit of training is good in it, and I offer free training to anybody. And it's not about the monetary perspective of it for me. I have a good paying career, but yeah, no. So I apply, and that's where the dangers come in, because then you're not only you could be coming across something that is incarnate evil, in my opinion, that does exist, but you're also dealing with people's lives and their personalities and possible mental health issues that of course, as well come across, that could lead to dangers to not just yourself, the team that you're bringing in, but also to the client or their family. So there's a lot of variables that you have to be cautious of.
That was one question I had. I love that you've done the research, you've connected with a lot of people. Is that what drew you to the demonology? Was it the people or that were involved, or was it more the experiences you've had with it?
Well, what drove me to demonology at first, to be honest with you, was the excitement of it, the unknown of it, right? And I'm being an oxymoron right now about saying you shouldn't get involved in this, but I did, because I had that question, right? Like I said, I had a cynic. I was a cynic towards God, right? I wasn't a skeptical or a believer. I was like, it doesn't exist, and I was still doing the research to find that if a higher power did exist or not. So I guess I was in the middle of it. But as far as demonology, it was more so because I had experiences investigating the paranormal in my youth, right? So, okay, I had these experiences, and a lot of them I'll throw out nowadays because I was young. My brain wasn't fully developed, as we know, it happens in the mid 20s, and so I think there was a sense of gullibility in me as well, even though I wanted to disprove it. There's also a little sense of you that wants it to happen, to disprove yourself and the thoughts that you have. So a lot of what I probably experienced when I was a child, or 18, 17 years old, 14, 15, 16, could be debatable, but I think it was because I wanted to experience, but I also wanted to dig deeper in the forms of what a demonologist would do if they did come across a circumstance. And of course, much later in my time, I did. That really kind of cemented everything that I was doing and the route I was on, and actually strengthened my faith wholeheartedly. So getting into demonology was the experience at first. Now it's, like I said, a vocation. It's helping people. I do a lot of cases free of charge, my own gas, my own travel, if they're willing to put me up in a hotel or in a bed in their house, then great. I'm not going to say no to that, because I have a good paying career, but I also have 2 kids. I have a house over my head. Bills like anybody else does, but I will never ask for anything out of people, because that's what I want to do, is I want to help people, but I also want to help myself better understand why people deal with these circumstances, what draws these evil spirits or negative spirits, or beyond. I'm also part of a parapsychology group. You said at the beginning, director of Presidium Warriors of St. Michael, which was a deliverance group, but we just actually merged with parapsychology group that's actually a nonprofit group in New England and in New England, Canada, Nova Scotia area, and led by 2 doctors in social science. We just merged, and so now I'm the New England supervisor of PPRI. But So I'm also heavily involved in parapsychology work, where I do believe that the human mind's capable of certain things and projecting, and there's many forms of that throughout culture, such as Tolper, egregores, poltergeist. So that's something I also involve in as well, and I try to uh, not cement my own beliefs onto things. I'm very objective. And I also like to draw on many theories, because there's a lot of theories in this field. So, but yeah, I went on a little bit of a tangent, but I got into demonology because of the experience at first. To segue back to what you asked.
I think I picked up on this, and so I just kind of want to circle back. So, as a demonologist researching these items, are you exposing yourself to all aspects of the written demonology out there? So, for example, books written by the not so savory individuals, like maybe like Aleister Crowley, or like the Lesser Keys of Solomon, and things that were used to encourage the practice of summoning demons versus educating.
Yeah, so that's demonology, which is summoning of demons to use them as your ploys. I do and have studied many of those people, like Aleister Crowley, Antoine LaVey, uh, or even Rasputin in some form of fashion. You would laugh, but you know, uh, there are a lot of people out there that had the same kind of mantra, or a way of provoking themselves to be something closer to God or against God. And yeah, I've studied these people. Like, I do find the Golden Circle very fascinating. I think Crowley was more of a nut, unfortunately. Yeah, there's many exploitations or explanations to tell you what they did. They used to go in a dark room and take a bunch of LSD and then start seeing things. I bet if I took a bunch of LSD, I'd start seeing stuff too, to be honest with you. So, but it's still fascinating to read and hear their perspectives of what they encountered, either if it was through drugs or through their rituals. So yeah, I'm friends with people that dabble in those kind of things, and I would never uh, participate or practice those things, but yeah, studying them is good. Like, I've studied witchcraft, I've studied Santeria, I've studied hoodoo, voodoo, studied many other forms of root work and other cultural rituals, because I want to understand what people's intentions or invocations are towards other people or towards themselves. It's good to know that stuff, and that's why I said it's not reading 4 or 5 books. It's basically a life study. There's so many things out there that you can read, so many cultures. Humanity in itself at this time age, we know, is probably about 250,000 years old, with earliest prediction of human civilization as we know it a little over 10,000. So there's a lot still unburied, a lot still that we do not know about our own humankind and what their civilizations were, and what were the troglodytes involved in too, like what kind of rituals I know they didn't have the same intelligence, but a lot of this stuff was passed down through genetics. And that's true. Not to get into a science realm here, but genetics is a magical thing, and we understand epigenetics now, where memories can be passed down. People that 100 years from now can probably relive a memory genetically from their ancestor. So crazy things happen, and so it's very fascinating to see kind of what people believe in, and what their rites of passage have been.
Psychologically speaking, visualization can be a very powerful tool. And so, are you ever concerned that by consuming, especially if we're looking at like grimoires and tomes and the sigils and stuff like that, that might have any kind of impact on you? Or are you pretty like grounded and protected that just has zero impact?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm untouchable. I do, of course, do my prayers. I do. I try to do best to live a good life. Like anybody else, I have vices, and I've done bad things and mistakes in my past. But you have to kind of shut that door, let the past be behind you, and become better and do better. So as long as you're always trying to attempt to be better in your life, and you're protecting yourself either through talismans or amulets or religious iconography. And when you're looking at these tomes or grimoires or sigils, I do believe in a new age, the new thought theory of laws of attraction, laws of intention. So I think that if you have the wrong intention reading those things, then you can probably open bad passages to certain unknowns. And but when I'm reading that, that's not the inclination that I have. It's more so that I'm doing this to learn about it and how to combat it if necessary, or understand it if I come across it. So I think that has a lot to do with it when you approach those items. There's a lot of people that perform rituals willy nilly and have a little bit of knowledge, and maybe they open a door or they read something and they have the wrong intention of it, and that's when chaos can consume you. But not in my situation. But of course, I have to be careful doing this line of work. I have a family, and I have things that could be affected, and that's something that's always in the back of the head, the back of the brain. But I also have to understand, if I have that fear, then fear will consume you, and these things then will happen. And if it does happen, at least I know how to handle it. I also have a lot of assets. I work with a retired Roman Catholic priest that we just announced a lecture series and workshop series coming up in October in 2025. Father Bob Bailey, he's actually a Roman Catholic priest, and so I have, and other people that I've worked alongside in the demonology field or the ministry field, that if I really needed the help, and I could call upon those people and they'd be there in a heartbeat.
I had a question. What um, do you just work with? You said you work with a lot of different types of people. Do you work with people who are maybe not religious that also are into demonology, like people that maybe have a different way of dealing with it, as well as what you're doing, or is it just a combination of things?
Well, I don't think you can really deal with demons or research the topic or apply it necessarily. More so, apply it if you are not monotheistic or polytheistic. Like, if you don't have a faith or a belief, then it's hard to then really justify that demons exist, right? But I have worked with people that are skeptics.
Yeah.
I've done things with Kenny Biddle, who works with the Skeptical Inquirer, and brain fart, but the research organization out of New York that researches claims that Joe Nichols a part of them. Very famously known in the skeptical field or even the paranormal field, because he investigated the Shroud of Turin and Ed and Lorraine Warren and other things in their cases. So, I do work with those kind of people because I want their viewpoints too. Like I said, I don't try to put so much my belief in everything. Like, I try to be objective, but when I do come across something that can be objectified, right? If I can garnish data, not evidence, data, because it's hard to say that something's evidential when it's not fact. But if I can collect data that there's things happening, the family is being affected, things are moving, or people are being scratched unknowingly, and they're not scratching themselves, or you see scratches appearing, which I have in two circumstances, then you have to, of course, understand that there is something going on, and there, I'm a cause and effect person. Like, I do my best to figure out what the cause is to why this effect is happening, but there's been many times, unfortunately, I'm not able to fully conclude to why the circumstance happened, because they're in such disarray that your automatic reaction is to jump in and help them, offer them rights, or offer them help either through our religious people. I used to as well be ordained, so, and still, of course, to this day, could do ritual if need to be, because I've been trained in it. But I do work with Father Bob, and I will tend to use him more so because he is still connected to the church to some extent, because even though he's retired, he's still a priest. That's never going to go away. And so, yeah, but I've never met somebody that believed in demons but wasn't religious. I think it's possibility not to believe in something if you believe in something good or evil, because why is good and evil? Was there a creator? What was there multiple creators, depending on if you're neo-pagan or a polytheistic viewpoint like Hinduism? So it's important to work with those people to understand their knowledge and understand their practices or their reasonings to why they don't believe into something. It's very important. You have to be an open door. I know there's a lot of people in this day and age that they have their viewpoint and other people's viewpoints aren't good enough, and that's not a healthy way to live. Because I want to be a citizen of the world, and I want to breathe and understand everybody that lives in this world, and you can't do that as a closed door.
Now, do you think that by identifying that you can't believe in demons unless your religion kind of blocks out a section of people that do believe in malevolent entities but won't define them as, a demon or like prescribed to a specific religion?
Well, demon's not a Christian word in the sense. Like, everybody monopolizes that to Christianity, but demon by definition is evil spirit or a devil, right? And an evil spirit exists in every cultural belief system, as far as I know.
Mhm.
And so it's hard to say that a demon exists without a form of some sort of higher power or some sort of celestial realm.
Mhm.
Because one thing that most religions can agree on and most demonologists can agree on, and that's very far and few between, is that these forces are non-corporeal, right? They never lived in human flesh or physical form. They
Mhm.
are of pure spirit or pure whatever. I wish physicists wouldn't disprove the idea of paranormal, which with the collider, they have many physicists have said that they would have found something that to be a spirit or a ghost or a higher power through the collider. But not everything can be discovered by science right away. It can take time. We know that through history. So but yeah, it's hard for me to believe that somebody believes in a malevolent spirit without believing in something higher than that. What created that? Why is it there? And those are questions you have to ask yourself if you believe in a malevolent spirit but don't believe anything further than that. Because what made it? What made us? Was it evolution, which of course nowadays is heavily debated. Darwinism is heavily debated. It's called neo-Darwinism nowadays, and a lot of people are actually starting to hack back on a lot of Charles Darwin's stuff, and especially in biology. But so things change, but I don't know how you can believe in a spirit if you don't believe in anything more.
Well, I think some people don't believe in the fact that it's a spirit. It's people believe in different dimensions, different entities, different, you know what I mean? Like, it goes beyond that, where there isn't like a creator that created these things. And so it's so abstract that I kind of, I wonder if assigning the idea that one has to be religious in order to believe in demons might be limiting the conversation a bit, because like you said, there are different cultures, different belief systems within those cultures. And so I think a lot of the cultures we're used to, like the traditional cultures that we used to be able to just categorize, right? We have Hinduism, Judaism, and it just like continues to go on. um we're finding those aren't finite. There are now additional, and sometimes not even their own categories. There's like transitional, right? There's things in between that fill that space. And so I do wonder if by limiting the definition, are we missing some of the story, if
Well,
that
yeah.
makes sense?
Well, technically, a non-corporeal spirit would be celestial, which is beyond this planet, right? That's what celestial means, or extraterrestrial. It's kind of very bleeds through the same way. That means
Hmm.
they're beyond this plane of existence. So a lot of people will say that a demonic entity is actually dimensional, right? That it can come back and forth between a space. I also am very in form of physics and metaphysics of it. I know string theory and all that lovely stuff, and I think a lot of it has bloomed and popped up because of the multiverse stuff and a lot of pop culture nowadays. But it is quite possible, right? And I'm not saying that if it is multidimensional or from another dimension or another plane, that you can't think, okay, well, but where if it comes from another dimension, what created that dimension, or how did it come into this dimension? So to me, at the end of the day, and this is not me promoting Christianity or promoting religion, because I'm not a Bible thumper at all. But I would say that you have to understand what's the origin points like, and to me is many of our origins, even though it's not Thionite and things have adapted and changed, still all those cultures have a creator, or even the polytheistic belief systems have a triangle structure to it. Something created those gods and goddesses. Greek mythology is a great point to that. Somebody, one being created the Titans, and the Titans created the gods, right, and the goddesses. So there's always that pyramid structure in our humanity of culture. So if it comes from a delta dimension, how does that structure follow suit? Are we just humanizing it, or those are the questions to ask. And I still think at the end of the day, if there's another dimension, what created that there? Because we know nothing just blooms from nothing, right? I'm not saying God created the planets. I'm not going to get into that stanza, because that's a whole debate that we can have, that theologians have been debating for thousands of years, scientists as well, and philosophers. But where is the origin points to these other dimensions? How do they exist? And there's so many unknowns still to what the universe is, and how expansive. We think we've found an endpoint, but really how expansive it is beyond our eyes, or telescoped, or even our thought patterns. So if aliens do exist, what created that? How do they originate? So there's a lot of questions you can speculate, or even think about, or even attempt to research. But a lot of these questions, unfortunately, the roadblocks, because there's not many details that you can overcome that hump, or that roadblock or hurdle, because there's nothing there, and that allows the speculation to flourish. And that's why some people have come up with great theories, far-fetched theories. That's why people can create Scientology, and like L. Ron Hubbard, and people can latch onto that, or a flying spaghetti monster, and people latch onto that. Hell, I'm a big Star Wars guy. In Australia, there's the Jedi religion. So I wish I was in Australia right now. So, but so it's ever changing, right? But I still think that, in my perspective of it, there's something that originated and created. And not everybody has to believe that. I'm not asking them to, but that's just where I'm at through my own research. And I've dug a lot into many different cultures and religions, and there's a lot more similarities than differences. And a lot of people look at the differences more, and then utilize that as a debate tactic or an attack tactic, and it's unfortunate.
I think um, what I think about when I'm thinking about these demons, right? What if you go at it from a Christian, or from a religious perspective, but that's not what you're dealing with, right? Like, it could be something completely different, right? And may not work, the methods that you're using. And so, is that something that you've run into? Is that something that, because I mean, I don't know. Like, I haven't had a lot of experience with demonology or demons in general.
Yeah.
So
So that's a great question, BJ. And to give you statistics, as much as I hate quantifying statistics and collecting the data and doing it yourself, because it sucks in my opinion, but being a statistical person, loving the idea of what it can present, out of all my cases, up to 500 or so, 1% of my cases were demonic. 1%. So that would equate to 5 cases, right? And so I haven't had much hands-on experience as well. And there have been times I've done certain things and it didn't work. But I also think if you start to lean into the parapsychology realm, I do think people can create. And the metaphysical realm would call this artificial intelligence outside the computers. And of course, in the paranormal or parapsychology sense, poltergeist, tulpas, egregores, I do think people can create something in their environment what they want. And if they feel like they're being haunted by this demonic force because of a mental health issue, or because of trauma, or because of a necessity to want, I think that they can create something that emulates to those capabilities and characteristics that they have read or have seen in pop culture. Because as we can tell, I know Ashley is very in tune with celebrity field and all that stuff. Everything on pop culture nowadays is something about something evil. All back in the day, the movies were about slashers or thrillers. Now, some of the biggest movies are Insidious, Conjuring, billion-dollar franchises, and that's what people harp onto. So they emulate this in their mind, and I think they can project. And parapsychology isn't a perfect field in itself. No social science is. It's not truly empirical at all. But it's very interesting how it's adapted. So but yeah, I think that not everything's a demon, and if you do come across something that is a millennia old or archaic, that not everything that you do will work against it. I know there's priests out there, like a Father Gabriel Morth, thought differently. He was the chief exorcist for over 40 something years, over 100,000 exorcisms, and he truly believed that an exorcism would work regardless, as long as the person had faith and the priest doing it as well garnished that same faith and allowed something to work through them. And he had a high success rate. And he also bled into the realm of psychology as well. He wasn't a PhD. Father Chad Rippercher, who's an exorcist nowadays, is a PhD in psychology. But I do think that it is quite possible. But I also think that that's why I would also, if I'm dealing with a Hindu, or dealing with somebody Native American, or dealing with somebody that's Muslim, I'm going to call one of their religious leaders, and I'll call a shaman, I'll call a Muslim leader, and I'll call a Hindu priest in, or a monk, and I will utilize their specialties, because that person might react better, and what is there might be influenced by their culture, or so there's a lot to it. I think there's a lot of the human mind involved in those kind of hauntings, because if you look at the word haunting, it's about someone being haunted, right? And Charles Dickens actually wrote that, and to me, is one of the greatest writers of our time. And he actually, one of his first novels was a beginning and ending chapter in a pamphlet called Haunted House. And he said the exact same thing: is a house could have something, but until the person comes in and activates it like a battery, it's not really going to have any participation. But once that person walks in, that energy, or that battery that you are, livens what is there, and then that's where the haunting happens, because you're being haunted from it. And that's the etymology of that word. So there's a lot of interesting things into that realm of what you could be dealing with, or how you can handle it. And I haven't had a full success rate either. I've had failures, I've made mistakes, but I also have had people not listen to my advice, and they continued being tortured, and I'd have to walk away, because there's only so many times you can lead a horse to water and make the horse try to drink the water. Sometimes you just got to leave the horse there, unfortunately, or the horse is going to drop from not drinking water. So sometimes you just got to walk away and go on to the next person that actually wants to receive your help and receive your information, your feedback. And a lot of the times that the people have followed my feedback or advice and continue through with the ritual I've done, they walked away fine. And a lot of these places did have quantifiable evidence or data, and things did happen through our viewpoint, through shared experiences, through data collection. And after that, nothing happened. So there's some proof to the pudding, but what that pudding's made of is the big to know.
I have a few things to unpack. So, I know, BJ, you asked if or it came up that, does it help using something from that person's culture to assist with the demonology? Does that make a difference? And I think a lot of that may also have to do with, if we take a step back and think, whether it's psychological, or whether it's actually a possession of some external entity, or it's something going on psychologically within that person. Ultimately, the door was opened by that person. It is something that originated from within them. So they might be more receptive to the icons and the themes from their own culture and their own religion, to them find that way to close the door themselves. So versus if I'm sitting here and I've got something going on and James comes in and says, hey, I have this, voodoo icon and it's going to help you. And we're like, what the hell is that? Like what is this? I'm going to be more shocked and like probably less receptive because I'm just trying to figure out what he's doing to me. So versus if he came in and spoke the language of whatever protection I feel is going to work. So I think possibly even if we go away from like, because I don't believe demons, and this is me, I'm not a demonologist, but I don't believe demons are Christian or Hindu and that they are by nature like, oop, I come from the Hindu religion, so this Hindu is going to work, icon is going to work on me. I think that it really is the power of the individual and the person coming in to perform those rituals and what they believe to kind of create that strong vibrational energy to push that out.
And you hit the nail on the head there, Ashley, because it's the truth. When you give feedback and you give advice, it's to empower them, right? There is a psychological battle that goes on. One of the things that where we tend to say demonic possession happens is, there's stages of it, but possession only then occurs if that person's will has been broken, their faith has been demoralized, and what is guarding them, their fortress of solitude, so to say, diminishes and falls apart. That's when they become entryways to certain things. So if you can rebuild their faith and rebuild their head on their shoulders, give them, and a lot of people I tell, to be honest with you, after you go through this, if it's a long period of time, short period, you should go see a therapist, because it will help you overcome the hurdles and the trauma that you faced. And it's important, to be honest with you. So yeah, yes, a faith does empower. We do realize that through neurotheology or neuroscience, they've done studies where somebody has faith, they think of it, and something in the brain actually fires off, right? So why would that be there? To me, when the brain works, that means it's doing something good for you. If it shuts off, we know we're going to be vegetables and dead. So anytime it's firing off to important and positive things, like instead of stress or anxiety and depression, that we know that it's doing something good. So it's important, but you have to be that receptor. You have to be that power tool, and that's why I say, if it's a different culture and different belief system, I will give them advice. But if I feel like I'm going to be more of an issue than a help, then I will call another religious leader or somebody of that faith or culture in, because I want to empower them and any way I can, and a lot of it is psychological. But that doesn't mean, if it's psychological, that doesn't mean that there's something external as well. And so the DSM-5 does have a disorder revolving around demons and external forces and beliefs. Schizophrenics also believe that something talks to them. So you have to, when you get involved in these things, you have to understand. I do a long questionnaire and ask them what medicines are. Do you see a therapist or a psychiatrist? I go down a laundry list, and if there are medicines, I work with a nurse on our team. She's been a nurse for over 20 years, and she works in the mental health aspect of it. I say, hey, what's this medicine for? If somebody's claiming possession from the get-go, when I get the case, I say, for me to get involved, you have to get a psychological evaluation and a physical done by your primary care doctor. If you don't do that, I don't take your case. It's because I want to tackle the natural before I'm tackling the preternatural, if there's any at all. So that's important. That's an important notion to understand when you're dealing with people of any culture.
Yeah, we've talked about that even in terms of crystals, like veering way left here, but we've had, crystal specialists, if you will, come in and say, hey, you have to have belief and put yourself into what you're doing. You can't just pick up stones and say, this is going to cure my alcoholism. This is going to cure my this. Like the stones represent something and they can only do so much. You also have to be a part of it. So it would make sense that, hey, I'm not going to throw a cross at you and that's suddenly going to fix everything. We have more work to do than that. And the person, I feel like it's a twofold. The person has to want that help, or else it's going to come right back, like you said. And the person, has to believe it's possible. And sometimes it takes you rebuilding them so they believe, right?
Yeah, well, a good analogy too is if I'm a medical doctor, right, and you're battling cancer, and you can do chemotherapy, take medicine that might not make you feel well, but you can do these things to fight the possibilities of this cancer, and then go into remission, and hopefully beat cancer. Or you can be some people that say, "Hell, I have cancer. I've lived a good life. I'm going to just ride it out, and it's going to take me." So I'm kind of giving medicine in a spiritual sense, but also in a mental sense as well. I'm giving them advice how to tackle things mentally, spiritually, and even physically. So if you don't take that medicine, it could come back, or your psychological troubles could come back. I do say that people that have dealt with this for a long time and then finally receive help is most likely going to have post-traumatic stress disorder, and you need to get help for that, because I can't help that. I have a bachelor's in psychology, but I'm not a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I can't give you all the necessary tools. I can give you tips and advice, but it's for you to then go to the next specialist and to garnish that help, and then move on with your life, and hopefully never have to deal with the circumstance again.
Now, I was wondering, we haven't really gotten into it too much, but are there any cases that you can talk about specifically? Any kind of specifics on something that happened? I think our listeners, for one, want to know what you've actually encountered. If there's anything that you'd be willing to share with us.
Yeah, so I talk about this case frequently, but I find it interesting because this is the time that I found that something could invade you, or kind of deceive you into not doing something. So there was a family in Western Massachusetts, three children, husband and wife, and I got the call, and or email, I should say, and then I made the call. And anytime there's children involved, I automatically get involved. Sometimes my cases have to wait weeks, months, because once again, I have a life, and I might be working on something else with another family, and I don't want to overload my plate, because if I'm overloading my plate, then I'm not putting enough attention on what their requirements are and what their needs are. And so when there's kids involved, I basically put everything aside and say, I have to deal with this, because you never know if the parents are persuading the children to believe something that might not be going on, and affecting them, and giving them childhood trauma with it. It's going to affect them the rest of their lives to a degree, or their early adulthood. So anytime there's kids, I jump on board. So I got the email, I did the questionnaire, I called them pretty fast within days. It was a Saturday, and I said I'll be there next Saturday, because I can't do things during the week. I can if it's close by, but Western Massachusetts is about 3 hour drive for me. It's not like a something I can do and stay overnight, especially if I have work. But so I said I'll be there next Saturday. I laid my head to go to sleep that night, and I had the most prolific nightmare that has followed me to this day. And this is many, many, many years ago. I'd have to say close to 8 years ago. And yeah, it's pretty scary about what I'm about to say, in a sense. But I went to sleep. I had this nightmare, and I'm not a dreamer. I don't have many nightmares. I do feel like the most imaginative people, and that's not a bad thing. Dream a lot, or have nightmares, and so basically it was me with my team driving to the client's house in Western Mass. We're talking, of course. I try to be funny as much as possible. I like to bring some sort of levity and um, kind of fun to life. And so we're bickering and all that fun stuff, and we're looking at the environment. You get to the client's house, we see the surrounding, the trees, the houses nearby, and Western Massachusetts, there's not many houses nearby. It's a wasteland, and so I see everything in the dream or the nightmare, and then the family walks out, the three kids, the mother and father, and they greet us. I at this point haven't had much details about them, what they look like. I had some photos of like scratches that happened, or something objects that moved that they took pictures of, and so but I'd never seen them top to bottom, and certain dimples or certain hairstyles or hair color. And so they come out, and I see these three kids, this mother and husband, and we walk in the house. I do a walkthrough of all houses because I want to make sure they're not hoarders or they're not lying about medications, and there's medications on the table. And I'm like, okay, why is that medication there? You said you're not on medication. What is this for? So I snoop around, so to say. And but I want to see how they live and what their livelihood is. And because it all adds up to the story of what the cause and effect. And so I do that. I sit down with the family, do another interview, and then instead of helping them uh, in the nightmare, I killed every single one of them, like Saw movie, Hostel movie. I like butchered them, cut them apart, stabbed them. Like I butchered them in my nightmare. And so I woke up startled, right? I'm like, oh, what the heck was that? Like that, it was brutal. Me killing kids, non-imaginative. I could never think of that. And so I was startled, like sweating, and I'm like, what was that? It didn't all come clear to me until that Saturday that we actually traveled to the case, and I had some hesitation because I'm in my head. I'm like, if I go there, if there's something there, what happens if this actually truly happens? What happens if something consumes me and I then actually kill them, and then I'm in jail the rest of my life in a psych ward or something like that? So these fears are there. They're dangling there, and so there's some hesitation, but I'm pretty stupid, so I'm like, snap out of it, James. You have to go there. And this is where it becomes very insane to me, is driving with my team, same team members that were in the nightmare, by the way. Um, and we pull up to the house. The houses are in the same spot as the nightmare. Trees are in the same spot, same color siding, same roofing material. Family comes out. They were wearing the same damn clothes that they were wearing in the nightmare a week before. Same dimples, same hairstyle, same hair color. I walk in the house. Couches are in the same spot, same color on the walls, same placements of beds, and like something sank. When I first saw the family, I'm like, oh shit. Sorry if I can't swear, but I
No,
was
you
like,
can.
oh shit, because that's my actual initial reaction. I was like, oh shit, and I'm like, I hesitated to actually want to go in the house for a second, but like I said, I'm like, snap out of it, James. Like, if you think these fears something that is here, and I think at that point when I seen the family and then walked in the house and saw their surroundings, I then realized, okay, there is something here, because it was trying to attempt to deceive me or attempt to get me away from not helping this family. Because at that point, I do believe it was an infestation stage, which is then it's trying to figure out the target, who it can molest, because they're more gullible or more attentive to what's going on. And so it was at that stage because they were all being equally kind of affected. And so, but when I walked in, it was like, I'm like, oh, there's definitely something here. And I just can't believe that everything came to fruition as the way it did in my nightmare. The only big difference is, of course, I walked away from that house not killing the family, because I would be in prison to this day, most likely. You
I
know,
was going to ask you where you hid the bodies. So,
yeah, right. But in all seriousness, I walked away, and there was one other time I didn't have to go back, but there was one other time they called me weeks later, saying that there's some experiences going on, and I said, remember the feedback I gave you, the tools and all the information that I gave you. You can't be fearful of this, or it's gonna, and you can't go back to any other bad routine that you were doing. If you were having internal strife between you and your husband, if you're gonna fight, leave the house, go somewhere and argue it out, or go have a date and have an adult talk or something like that. So I gave them that feedback, and then after that, I never heard back from them again, which to me is always means success, because I don't necessarily reach out to the families, because Early in my life, I did, but at the same time, then I started realizing that I'm a crutch. And once you break your leg, and you're on the crutch, and then once your leg's healed, you don't need that crutch anymore, and you go on back onto your daily life activities. So I feel like sometimes when I call these people, I kind of bring back the past that they don't need to remember.
Mm.
And so I let them, if they need me, they know how to contact me, kind of thing. So, but yeah, that was a case that was life changing, because I had at that point never had something interfere in my life to that degree. I did go through an attachment much earlier than that, but that wasn't demonic, and that was more something from ego and being pompous in my youth. But that was the first time anything ever affected me in that way, and it was startling, but it was eye opening that regardless of how much you prepare and how much you have good intentions, that things can thwart you, and sometimes non corporeal.
Man, if that's ever been an ad for not having strife in your marriage, you just got one, like, or the demons will come. Literal demons.
Well, they didn't have much strife in their marriage, but when you have three kids, I actually, I think I know you have kids, right? Not to bring that personal
I have
subject.
3.
But I also have two. But so we all know, at least I can't assume about BJ and John, but people with kids know that it's not easy, and sometimes it can be hair pulling and aggravating, and but sometimes you have to learn how to corral that in, and be the parent, or be the person that they look forward to, and understand and tell them what things are. So you have three kids, you have something, strife in your marriage, and so it's a smorgasbord of things. And that's what happens with a lot of people with kids, or they have fighting. Some One of my cases was local, right down the road, and this is where I got the attachment. It wasn't demonic, but they a lot of them were into drugs, and I don't think drugs were involved in what they were experiencing. I think it didn't help them getting to that point, but they were involved in drugs. They were involved in much family strife. It was a Portuguese family, like 10 people in the same house kind of situation. And it was like a nuclear bomb waiting to blow up because of everything, a little activity that they were part of. And of course, the experiences they, to be honest, were having, because I had some experiences with my team there. And so it's interesting to say that the once go back to the etymology of the word uh, haunted or haunting, is that sometimes we are the triggers. Most of the times we are the triggers to certain things, and in a lot of these cases, there could be something dwelling, or something watching, waiting, or something that you might not even mean to go pick up if you go to a bio-haunted location. I'm not saying this wholeheartedly in the, be careful where you go, and be cautious, and ruin your life, and put yourself in a shed or your house the whole time. But sometimes when you're going past certain things or involved in certain things, and you have strife in your life, you never know what you're going to pick up. And that could be put forth towards even going to work. I love saying this because it's true. Being a project manager and running a lot of people in the field that I do, is that if I go to work every single day and it's a negative environment, that negativity is going to weigh on me. And it's going to then eventually affect me, and I'm going to bring stress home, anxiety home. Then it's going to affect my marriage, my kids. It could make me an alcoholic, where I start drinking to put my sorrows away. So, but if it's a positive environment and it's go lucky, and you're a negative person, it's most likely going to kind of like, okay, I can't either be here, or okay, I love going to work every single day, and then you come home happy from work, right? And you don't bring your work life into your home life. So you can use that as an example as well, because it's very important. So
Yeah,
you know,
I like what you said. Don't be afraid to be out in the world, but I think there's something to be said about being mindful about how you are out in the world. So, what you're subjecting yourself to and how you're approaching it. Like you said, just how are you approaching those various environments?
yeah.
Have you ever had a demonic entity make itself known to you?
No, not physically or even in apparitional form or manifestation. Just the only time that something I'd ever, in that sense, interacted in my life was that nightmare, but I didn't see it as well. The
That was
only
more than enough, I'm sure, though.
yeah. So there was a case I did in Cumberland, Rhode Island. It was on. I didn't appear on it because I don't do much television. I've appeared on a couple things, but I don't think my work is necessarily meant to be paraded out there. And I would love to be on a program that would actually tell the truth to the full extent and not mince my words. And that's why I steer clear a lot of. I know a lot of producers, and I know how they are, and what they want. It's entertainment. They want the big bang for the buck, and they want to thrill people. But so one of the cases that I was involved with was on my ghost story. It was Cumberland, Rhode Island. I didn't see it, but I did have an experience there, and I brought. This was the first time I worked with Father Bob, and this was over 10 years ago. Is that they actually on their DVR. This is when people actually would set up DVRs and run cables, and on the DVR they had it pointing in a room towards a door where a lot of the activity was said to happen or nearby, and they see this the 7-foot shadow figure walks past the door, then comes back, looks at the camera, and then disappears. And I definitely believe that was demonic because of the experiences the homeowner Willie was having. And I will say his name because it was on television, so it's not like it's a secret. But yeah, so when I got involved, you know, I had checked it out once, and I said, okay, Father Bob needs to come here because it felt off. I'm not saying I'm clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant, but I do believe in demonic cases. There is like a barometric pressure change. There is definitely a heaviness within the home that even somebody that might not necessarily claim to have abilities will feel. It's definitely heavy, and it's like walking through a lot of sand or a lot of mud. And but so when I went there with Father Bob, we were sitting at the table talking to Willie with the team ECPRT, and I was wearing rosaries at the time because it is the greatest weapon if you believe in the rosary in the Catholic perspective. But it actually severed right at the metal, and fell in my lap, and everybody saw it. And that was enough to show me as well that there's something here, and it doesn't like religious iconography, and it's making itself known. And Father Bob and I did do something there. I think it helped. From my understanding, it did help for a long time, but um, it eventually did come back, and I don't know whatever happened from that. To be honest with you, because I was never called back in. I think the team tried to handle it themselves. I don't know how it went, but yeah, no. So it's important to understand that these things are out there and they can affect you, and there are certain cases that have changed my perspective where something has happened, or I had that nightmare. But a lot of the times, to be honest with you, when you're there, you feel that heaviness, but it's very quiet. And I like to say, and I'm funny because I love Japanese culture. I have a samurai sword in the back in the box. I don't know if you could see it, but my whole body is full of Japanese art. But so I always say that a demon is like a shinobi. They'll strike when you least expect it, and they hide in the shadows. If they know that there's somebody there to bring light and change, they're not always gonna come out roaring, because if they can deceive you to think that there's nothing there and you walk away, then they kind of won that battle. So so not all the time something happens, but probably every case something subtle did happen, enough. But a lot of the times teams bring me in from their investigations, and they have the data, and they've had the experiences. So it's a little bit easier to digest. But of course, I still do my own thing because not every people are fallible. So you always have to double check their work and make sure as well.
It's funny you mentioned the rosary. I don't talk about this point in my life very often, but for you, I will share the story. We'll decide if I choose to leave it in. So there was a time in my life where I was going through a series of I don't know what you would call it, but I call it attacks, and wasn't doing so well. So I ended up driving quite some distance to go stay at, like, I'm like, I need to be with my mom because I just, you want that comfort. And so I drove to my mom's, and I remember that there was this necklace I always wore that, to me, was a protective piece. Like, it just energy out to protect me, kind of like, like you have your rosary. And so I had taken it off to shower, and I rarely took this off, but I took it off to shower, placed it on the side table. Went to shower, came back in the room, and my mom came in to talk to me. And it was important that she was there because a lot of what I was experiencing alone. But in this moment, there's someone else in the room with me. And so she's talking to me, and I got this sense of dread. And I didn't know why, but I'm like, dread came over me. And then we heard a loud popping sound, and there was a big spark, and there was a, what do you call it, a power strip, kind of. It was pretty far away from where my necklace was, but it sparked and arced so hard it hit the necklace. I'm like, oh shit. And we're like, unplug that, right? Because we're thinking faulty something. So I go to put my necklace on later after that because I hadn't even thought about it. And it had completely melted. So I couldn't put it on. The piece itself was fine, but like the chain had melted. Like, you don't get to put this on. And I was like, okay, I need to go find a chain really quickly. But it was weird because in that moment, there's a lot of psychology you can go with there. But in that moment, for me, I had felt like that wasn't an accident. That wasn't a coincidence. That is my protection necklace that was just taken from me. But I'm stubborn, so I was like, I'll just get a chain and put it back on, and take that.
That's very eye opening. I hope you do leave this in the interview because I think that's important that things like that can happen, and you're dealing with attacks and having that kind of verification on a material item, right? And something that you garnish to, something that you feels protects you,
Hmm.
then gets done like that, and it's a very interesting thing, and people do experience that, so those have uh, you know been stories from survivors or experiencers, and people do experience that, so it is eye-opening for sure, but it sounds like you handled it very proactively in the sense of not letting it frighten you and scare you away, um, and you just said, now I'm going to get another one and I'm going to feel my comfort.
Yeah. And I feel like at that moment in time is also when I realized because there was a lot going on. And I realized after that happened that, like, I'm intentionally being put in a fear space. And I was like, I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I will not allow myself to be afraid anymore. And so I actually chose, because remember, I started it with, I went home to my mom. I chose, I'm going back to my own space. I am not going to be fear driven away from my life and who I am. And
Yeah,
so,
it makes sense because a lot of people that deal with it, they seclude themselves. They change. There have been cases documented by other people that they've never done a drug in their life, and they start experiencing this, and they relinquish the drugs, or they seclude themselves from their family, their loved ones, their friends, and then it just progressively gets worse. And it's important to understand that you're in a fear circle because if you don't, that's when you're consumed, and it's a hard thing because with humanity, and back to the psychology thing, one of the things that you're early taught in your psychology courses and in your early program is that fear is allotted to the human. And a great analogy or description to this is if there's a bush or a brush moving, a lot of humans are going to automatically jump to the conclusion that there's an animal ready to pounce on them, or there's an animal in there. And most likely it's actually the air that you can't see, or a wind draft or a draft that is moving that brush or the bush. And but us humans jump to the worst case scenario, and then that's what leads you down to a deep dark path, because you start feeding into it even though you might not be verbalizing it. You're emotionally and mentally thinking about it in a worst case scenario.
I don't think it's healthy to live with the absence of fear because it does serve a purpose. It was survival, right? Back in the day, back in the caveman days, that probably was an animal in the bush, or we need to make sure it's not because they were higher up on the on the food hierarchy there. But now is a time where we have the privilege of not having to be so afraid, and we do kind of knee jerk right into that fear and leaning into it.
Yeah, fear is a bad emotion, but it also positively so is important one, because if you're not fearful of something, then that means that you're all knowing, and knowing that's everything is going to happen. I could walk outside my house right now and get hit by a bus. You have to have those inclinations that certain things can happen, and that's a fear, right? A spider came down right now, I'd be fearful of that. You see me run like a little girl into the next room. But so yeah, there's an importance to it, but you can't also lavish your life in it as well.
Yeah, you can't let it consume you. Holy cow, this time has gone by really fast, guys. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, it went by really fast.
Is there anything else you want to talk about, James, before we start wrapping things up?
Father Bob Bailey and I are going on a lecture series workshop, I think, which is important. A lot more people need to hear about this topic, also have a better understanding of the possibilities or the misconceptions of what people think they deal with. So starting October of this year, we're presenting a lecture series called Faith and Reason. Of course, Father Bob's faith and I'm reason, because I approach it in a different perspective. But we're coming together, distinct different perspectives, but also comparable, and something that I think people are going to flock to, and hopefully they do, to understand the work that I do, the work he's done as a Roman Catholic priest, and the deliverance ministries he has run. So yeah, it's something big coming up, and I really hope people eat it up, because not just because of clout or anything like that, but I think there's so much people need to learn about this aspect of the field. It's not an amusement park, and it's not easy to just slap a title on your name and run with it, because you can do danger to people. So I hope people come out to these lectures. They'll be announced on my social media, and it's really the biggest thing that I have to say, because it just was announced yesterday to the public, and so we're going to be putting a lot of work into that, and I really hope it reaps the rewards for people that listen to it.
No, that's fantastic. And speaking of social media, where can people find you? Website, social media names?
Yeah, so I'm only on Facebook. I used to have all the platforms, but I went on a 2-year hiatus from social media. It was the best thing I've ever done in my life, and somehow I got suckered back into it through my own necessity and needs, because social media is an outlet for people to reach out to you, or you to promote your lectures and your activities. So Facebook, you can find me on James Annitto, Annitto. The only one that's on Facebook. There's no other James Annittos out there beside my dad, and he does not have Facebook. But to easily find me through my website, you can do jamesannitto.com, or if it's easier because you can't spell it, demonology.org. Is a website that I run that connects to my website, demonology.org. And if you want to reach out to the group that I work with, if you are dealing with a haunting, or you feel like you are, or you feel like you're dealing with something different, ppri.net. And you go into the system, contact them. You'll go through our program of being contacted, and then we'll send a team out there. So yeah, those are a couple websites that you can reach me at, and reach out to me through my websites. I also give my number out because people do need it. I'm not scared of people sending me hate mail or trolling on me, because I'll troll them right back. So you can reach out to me 401-808-7416 if you really need help, or you want to reach out to me for mentorship. Just do so. Just text me. You've heard me from this interview, and I'll help you. And if you respect me, I respect you. If you don't respect me, you'll find out what you get.
BJ or John, do you guys have anything? Any final thoughts?
I just appreciate you coming on and just getting your perspective. I think is unique, and I think I like how in depth you went into all of the different scientific and psychological stuff. And yeah, I for one would like to just know more of the stories and more of the situations that you got into and how you guys got out of them.
Yes, thank you for coming on. Very interesting to hear your stories. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening to this episode of 300 Podcast with your host. I'm John Thomas.
I am Ashley Lunar Goddess.
And I'm BJ Seura.
If you have any questions, comments, or episode suggestions, please feel free to email us at 300podcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so already, please like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media. You don't want to miss amazing guests like Mr. James here.
Until next time.
Dun dun dun.